At the Center for Digital Strategies at Tuck, we examine how information technologies affect individuals and how they enable business strategy. Through our Brit Technology Impact series, we've looked at IoT, big data, cloud, social, mobile, and video. This year, the Brit series is considering the convergence of all 6 of those technologies. So we invite you to listen in as our MBA Fellows interview top executives in a series titled Connected Everywhere, the Transformation to a Hyperweb World.
James, thank you very much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So to start, why don't you give us a little background into your work at Forrester and how it relates to how you started to build a theory around digital disruption.
Absolutely. So the work that I've been at Forrester off and on for about 16 years. And over those years, I've actually covered a number of different industries and looked at things from a number of different perspectives. What's been interesting to watch, go back 16 years, we're talking 1998 when I first landed there after I'd been doing my own work and research as an academic. AOL was the number one connected service, or ISP we called them back then. At the time, Napster hadn't been invented yet. So Google hadn't been invented, no Facebook, no YouTube, none of that. But even at that time, we could tell that something was going to happen. And so what we were doing then, and what I've done since then, is to keep my eyes trained on the consumer. Because if the consumer doesn't buy it, literally or figuratively, if they don't go for it, it's not going to happen. But if they snap something up, if they really grab something, like Napster, what does that tell you? What does that tell you about what they really want, what they really need, and what they respond to? The history of marketing and product development is full of people thinking they're making a product for a consumer. They are not. They are making a set of benefits and attributes and offering that as a package to a customer or a user who then either has to negotiate perceiving those benefits and attributes and then choosing to adopt them, or through great brand marketing or something like that, will be persuaded to take a risk and to adopt that. So in the history of all the work that I did in consumer adoption, which was my area as an academic, most adoption was slow. And we developed this idea of the early adopter, you know, that curve that we talk about where you have the early adopter, the early majority, the late majority, and then the laggard. That early adopter was this prized animal. Everyone wanted it. They were all hunting for it. Turned out, as we studied that early adopter, that person didn't exist. There was no single person that was willing to be the early adopter for everything. Well, what was happening is that for every product or service, there was someone willing to be the early adopter because they cared about the benefits that that product delivered. But because new products came along so infrequently, genuinely new services came along so infrequently, it meant that we didn't notice that. Because in your industry, you might offer someone a new thing every 5 or 10 years, and then you'd see whether they adopt it. Oh, there's our early adopter. But when you start seeing this across industries, and then you see it accelerate, people are adopting these things called MP3 players, and then they're adopting desktop computers overall, going online, shopping online, and they're doing it all in rapid succession. You'd think, wait a minute, people have never adopted new technologies and services that quickly in the history of the world. What's going on? And that actually has been my job, to figure out what's going on. You know, and I come ready to ask that question because of my academic training, but I also then at Forrester was given this massive amount of consumer data. We surveyed, depending on the year, at least 100,000, sometimes 250,000 people a year about their technology, attitudes, behaviors, uses, expectations, and so on. And basically what it boiled down to, and the knowledge that we base all of our analysis on now, is that there is no such thing as the early adopter. There is a consumer who wants a benefit, and whoever gives them that benefit in the most friction-free way possible will win. Technology allows you to reduce friction. Technology-driven business models like Uber, Airbnb, you reduce friction. When you reduce friction using these technologies, people will do things faster than they ever have, and you will get not 10 million customers, which back in the day would have been an amazing number, but 100 million customers, like a Pinterest. You might be like WhatsApp and get even 600 million customers. And suddenly you're talking on a scale that's never existed really in the history of the world without being a country or something like that. So my job has been, and the book Digital Disruption that I wrote was to summarize my knowledge that I've accumulated over this period in this job. But my job has been to say, if we boil it down to what's really happening, you have consumers and their fundamental needs, You have the technology that removes the barriers between their needs and the benefits they seek. And then the companies who are willing to step up and say, well, I'm not a bank, but you seem to want this service, so I'm going to make it for you. Or no one's ever done this before, but it sure looks like a good idea, and the technology makes me capable of doing it, so I'm going to do that. So digital disruption is about that whole package, taking advantage of consumers' real needs, not new. These aren't new consumers that didn't exist before. They're the same people. We have the same biology as our parents' generation, their parents, and so on. What we have is a digitally disrupted environment that allows consumers to act differently than they ever have before. And so my job is to help companies understand that, prepare themselves to serve that customer, and that's where the fun starts.
Are there any industries or areas that you think are very ripe for digital disruption at this point?
Yeah. So ripe is a vague term, and so it's a good one because sometimes it's better to be vague. But if we try to get specific about what ripe means, the ones that are most ripe because it's just easiest to do are the industries where your product is actually information-based. So all the news media, all the entertainment media, they're the ones that are experiencing this first. And for a lot of time, most of my case studies came from media, which happens to be my background anyway, so I was uniquely interested in it. And you newspapers, Napster I mentioned before. What was really happening with people adopting Napster? Why did they go in that direction? Well, it's because the product itself could be completely digitized. The friction was removed entirely. Especially the friction of purchasing was removable. But that wasn't the main driver. People didn't use Napster because they wanted to cheat the system. They used Napster because Napster was the easiest way to find and listen to music. More people now use YouTube to listen to music than have ever used Napster to steal music. So that tells you what they're really there for. And we could have seen this coming if we'd spent the moment of time necessary to look at what was happening because of Napster and say, what's really going on here? And then we realized, if you give it to them in a way that's easier to consume than in the old way, they'll do it. And that's what the music industry should have done. Okay. Moving on, though, from industries where the product itself can't be digitized completely, but can the experience of the product be wrapped in a digital envelope or layer? And that turns out to be really just about every product experience on the planet. From brushing your teeth, and I have written case studies about that, to putting on hair and makeup, to checking your blood glucose level, to driving in a car. These are all very physical things. And they can be completely expanded through digital tools and digital experiences.
So I think that about wraps up our time. Again, speaking with James McQuivey, Forrester Research and author of Digital Disruption. James, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.